My guest in the Nimataion today is Mogg Morgan, and together we're spinning a yarn. Mogg, you're a magician, author, publisher. You specialize, amongst other things, in ancient Egyptian magic. Uh, Great to have you here.
And it's great to be here. That's true. My personal specialization is become Egyptian magic, really,
Mm.
the Crowley stuff. But the publishers, we do quite a wide range of stuff, in the a cultural kind of framework.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few other Egyptian books, but we do the standard occult, not standard, of course, right? Far from standard. Substandard. No, the grimoires and the kind of Crowley magic and paganism in general, witchcraft.
Mm. Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. Yeah.
we counterculture.
Important work.
Yeah.
So, what has been your favorite childhood story?
My favorite, well, I was trying to think, about childhood stories. I don't think it was. I come from a fairly ordinary background in some ways, working class background, but there are always lots of books in our house. But not when people talk about the kind of childhood stories that they had and everything like that. I think most of my stuff was from the TV and stuff like that. It wasn't something. So I was racking my brains, but then I thought, actually, the thing that really sticks in my mind as a childhood story would be kind of the Dalek annual. Which I don't have anymore, but I kind of really it really freaked me out. Well, it really freaked me out. Obviously, when I was a kid, there was this TV show, Doctor Who, right, which is a kind of bit whimsical and stuff. Uh, and it was a kind of big hit and stuff. And so we had this. So come Christmas, the book, you can tell was the Dalek Annual, so which was a kind of whole kind of book about the Daleks and with a story. And it was, yeah, it was quite, I don't know. It was, I suppose, the whole story, the whole thing about Doctor Who, when it first started, it's about totalitarianism, really,
Yeah.
one way or another. That's the metaphor being played out in the whole story, and why it is so frightening. And of course, and the idea of London and Britain being invaded, which hasn't happened to us for a long time, so this is kind of like a primal fear, certainly as a child. So it was reflected in the Dalek Annual, really. And there were, I suppose it's not just about the kind of fascist thing. I think it's about totalitarianism and Stalinism in general, really. I come from quite I would say a sort of disillusioned political household, really. So they're quite interested in the political ideas, but the thing I liked about that stuck in my mind about the Dalek Annual was that whatever invention there was, right, in the world, right, the discovery of the wheel. So the discovery of the wheel in the Dalek Annual, it would always be the Daleks who discovered the wheel,
Okay.
or the Einstein's theory of relativity. It would be something like Einstein Dalek who created relativity. And it was, I suppose it was good. It was talking about a certain mindset of people who, I suppose, appropriate different ideas, right, and sort of invalidate everybody else and claim it's theirs. So it was, I don't know, it was very, very influential on me. And of course, all the kind of stuff about, I think a lot of kids' books then, like the popular, were actually very subtly political, really. There's probably propaganda in its own way, but I think it was fair enough. So yeah, that's probably the only childhood thing I can. But as I say, we always had a lot of books in the house, and my mother was a great reader of popular bodice rippers and stuff. So so my childhood reading would be kind of reading all these bodice ripper things, that my mother had left around, and horror fiction things. So I kind of skipped. I think I skipped a lot of the generation of childhood thing because I just used to pick up the stuff that my mother was reading, and she went to the library every week and to sort of top up with all these kind of popular fiction things, which are quite historical fiction. So I got a taste for that kind of thing, and I'd head off and come back. I was quite young, really, and we'd be back at the desk, right, and she'd have all this great pile of Frank Yerby novels and all this sort of stuff, and I'd have these books by Sigmund Freud on on the analysis of dreams or hypnotism, right? This is the thing. So the librarian says, do you think that's really appropriate for a child of his age to be reading Sigmund Freud and these books on hypnotism? She kind of picked them up. She said, well, I don't know, they look quite interesting, really, don't they? So yeah, so I had these things. So I had this book on hypnotism, which I then taught you how to hypnotize people. So I spent, I'm quite young when I'm doing this. So what do we do? I just sort of spent my time trying to hypnotize my friends.
I did the same when I was 14 or something.
I'm going to hypnotize you and stuff. I don't know. It's quite difficult. I think basically you have to bore them into a trance, don't you? That's the secret of hypnotism.
Yeah.
Or according to this book, all the techniques in this book are kind of quite boring, but I think they've got a kind of more interesting. It is actually quite an important part of magic, these sort of stuff. It was, that's the way I look at it. It was like an early training in magic, and it's interesting to say you're supposed to be able to sort of hypnotize yourself. But I think occultists do it in a different way now. They do it by following this sort of series of images, sort of taking you deeper and deeper, whereas the books I got were not as interesting. So yeah, no, it definitely influenced me. It's the other thing. I suppose my mother was. People say, "Oh, we weren't really a very religious family," but her definition of religion was, being kind to animals, or being. She said, if I was younger, I'd be an animal liberation person. I'd be breaking into the laboratories and getting all these animals out and stuff. And she says, if that's not religion, if when I go to they say that you're not religious enough, she said, I don't really care. That's for me. Religion is about compassion. It was very, very influential on me, really. And so most of the childhood books I got, apart from the Daleks, were always about were always animal stories. Were always stories about animals of one sort. So like the Jack London book White Fang, which is I think an amazingly magical book, really, still, which is again about this relationship between a person and this sort of half wolf, Jack London. And I think this other one, The Call of the Wild, as well, which is about the wilderness and stuff. So these things, and also I think probably I always think of them as the same with the Algernon and Blackwood stories. There's an amazing story about you see what I'm getting at. I used to read all these things. I used to scare myself to death in the end. I had terrible trouble sleeping at night and everything. It was just good because I'd be having all these visions and stuff.
Yeah.
There's this kind of incredibly scary Algernon Blackwood story I read as a kid called the Wendigo.
Yes. Oh, a
Called...
classic. Yeah. How old were you when you read it?
Yeah, I don't know, right? I think I was just 10 or 11 or something.
Oh, yeah, that's quite young for it.
This spirit that you it's an I think it's an American Indian thing. You meet this spirit in the forest.
Yeah.
And you're compelled to follow it through the woods, So once you've detected this thing, it moves through the trees and you have to follow it, and you can't stop. It takes you through the wilderness and through the wild. And so anyway, I always brought up in the middle of inner city, but I used to spend quite a lot of time walking out into the countryside and looking for these sort of places. In the end, we ended up living in the home village of someone called Arthur Machen, who's another, and you know, his stories have kind of permeate the area as well, and all the forests. We don't have forests on the level that you do in Germany, but we have a little bit.
Austria,
yeah. You know, I think you have really scary
yeah, they can be
forests that you can really get lost in and stuff. You can usually find your way out in this is in Wales in the forest, but still it's fairly. And Arthur Machen wrote where his story set them in the area in the woods. So I don't know. But even before I read Arthur Machen's stuff, I spent a lot of time in the same woods, kind of looking for these things. And I think one time, it's a kind of weird thing that someone said, "Oh, I think they worked out I was kind of a bit weird, really. There's this stone circle. There's this stone circle in the local park. Quite a big park, beautiful parks in Wales and stuff. So I went and found this place, and I had this kind of, I suppose you say this is quite nice. So I like to, before they call it psychogeography, I spent a lot of time walking around these places, looking for the places in the stories. So I walked to the stone circle and had this sort of mystical experience, really. But then, so I go to the library. As I spent a lot of time in the library, partly because my mother took me to the library all of the time. And I kind of sort of got asked the librarian about the stone circle, and he said, "Oh, it was only built a couple of years ago." it was yeah. So it was, you know, which is weird. It's said it's 100 years old. It's only 100 years old, and there's loads of really old ones all the way around us. These monuments, but the one that I'd kind of battened onto was built for because when they have this festival every year, the Eisteddfod, Wales, they move it around the different villages and towns, and they build one of these stone circles. And I think the idea of doing that comes from another slightly kind of fantasist character as well, really, which is someone called Iolo Morganwg, and who basically made the entire Druidry up, right? Because he thought he read all this stuff, and he thought the original was so boring that that he could do a better job of putting the magic in it. What he's getting, the old Welsh stories, a lot of them are not really a lot of magic in them. They're about kings and queens and battles and stuff like that, which does have a certain magic, but not quite what you want. You know, if you're looking for you're searching for the druids and stuff like that. So he made it up, but he made quite a good job of it. So with my stone circle, which is down to Iolo Morganwg, but I think it's, I accept that. I think it's okay, really, that it's just the circle itself. Maybe any circle constructed will, if you're a sensitive person and you've got an open mind, which I kind of did, will give you these sort of experiences, really. Then for me, that was the beginning of the sort of magical journey, really. Those are the sort of influences. I should sort of mention, I feel, because I talked a lot about my mother, which is okay, which is good. I don't usually do that. That from my father, who wasn't a great reader, but he was quite creative, artistic type person, and the thing that he used to always look at was his photographs, because he joined the army when he was a teenager at the end of the Second World War, and he went to India. He was only 17 or something like that, and they sent him to India, and he took this little camera with him, and he took all these pictures of his experiences in India. And so we had all these pictures, some of which were quite gruesome, really, but quite, because all the warfare and everything that they're going through. But I think and of course, to go to India, then you had to go via Egypt. And so there were pictures of them in Egypt because the British base was next to the pyramids, it's in Giza. And other places in Cairo as well. He'd been there. So I think we used to look at this picture book all of the time. We'd get, whenever they went out, we'd sneak this book out, and me and my brother, and we'd be looking at these really crazy pictures that he'd taken. So I think it turned me on to India.
Mm.
And also I think in the end it turned me on to Egypt, because these were the two. So I kind of felt I had to go there, really, because he was always full of crazy stories about what he'd done in India and in Afghanistan. He was in Afghanistan of all places. So when he was an old guy, he's always because when the war broke, it's I was there, blah blah blah. So yeah.
Mark, that's fascinating. You just closed the circle to the beginning of our conversation. Not a circle, not of stones, but of stories from faraway worlds, from the Daleks and hypnotism and the wilderness and yeah, it's all about these wild, unknown, faraway places, and how they influenced you from a very early age on. That's fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this, and I love how this blends into your work today.
Yeah, it does.
For
Absolutely.
people, link to your podcast is in the show notes, and that was a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me.
Looking forward to talk with you again. Bye-bye. The world is magical.